we all should start learning a second language, learning how to play an instrument, learning something that takes your mind working out of the ordinary. That's going to be expanding. That's going to be systematic, and that's when learning a language comes in. It's a brilliant exercise for your mind.
Yeah. And I thought I knew English, and I couldn't, understand a little bit. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Sorry, like I couldn't understand anything. And she's like, oh, do you speak English? I'm like, yeah, a little bit. And then she made me move. She asked me to move and exchange seats with someone else because I wasn't able to understand her,
Because a lot of people say, oh, I want to travel around the world, but that's going to cost me a lot. And I don't have enough money for that. And I don't know what do I have to do. I always tell them, trust your English. In Rio, we're having, on the same day, which is today, we're having Red Hot Chili Peppers concert.
Oh, yes. Amazing.
Which is huge. It's something that I'm sure there are people from all over the world there. And the whole parts of Brazil, anxious for watching it live. We also have Roberto Carlos, the singer, singing there in Rio today as well. And on the same day, within 2 hours, I guess, the big final of Libertadores.
Oh, okay. That's what I've seen on the news, like all the time.
Yeah.
Is it Boca Juniors?
Boca Juniors versus Fluminense.
Fluminense, okay.
So
they're taking over the whole beach in Rio de Janeiro.
I guess the day before yesterday, I heard about a huge fight involving some of the fans. Unfortunately, it happened there. There was a lot of tension, and they were talking about maybe canceling the tickets from people from Argentina, just try to avoid a conflict, but that could be actually even worse because they could just go berserk about that.
Of course, they would go wild, like if they couldn't go to and watch the match. Of
course.
Destroy everything.
Not to mention because they paid at least 500 reais for one ticket. And I can imagine that's a lot of money for us. You can imagine for people from Argentina coming. Yes.
Given their situation.
Their current economic situation. So I'm really crossing my fingers for everything goes well. Because today we could expect something bad going there, but let's have faith that the police and all the security forces involved around these three big events will be enough for holding everyone to have a good time.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be as crazy in Brasilia? 2 days? Is it 3 days from now? Because we're both going to the Red Hot Chili Peppers concert.
Yes, really.
But probably not that crazy, right? I feel like in Rio everything gets extra crazy, because of the city, the way it is, and the people there. Not trying to be judgmental, but like we see on the news all the time, the crazy things that happen there.
As we say, so many things happen at the same time.
Yeah.
In Brasilia, there won't be so many things happen at the same time. Not as big as in Rio.
Not as big. Yeah.
But I believe that if the band can put all their effort on that concert, we can talk about the example of the Guns N' Roses concert we had in Goiânia.
It was okay, like nothing happened.
Yes, and it was an amazing concert. If you talk to everyone, absolutely everyone who attended that concert, they will be all saying the same thing. Oh, it was time of my life.
Yeah.
In Guns N' Roses, everything, they totally exceeded the expectations.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, especially coming to Goiânia, because when we hear those big names, those big bands, we think of, they might go to São Paulo, to Brasilia, to Rio de Janeiro, to some cities in the south of Brazil. But to Goiânia, it's not that common, even though we have a pretty big, rock scene here. It's not all country, it's not all sertanejo music, country music, Brazilian country music. Yeah, but we also have big fans of rock and roll. And it was amazing, having them here.
I can recall Paul McCartney coming here 2013. Also Cyndi Lauper. Scorpions. We had a couple of big bands in internationally known coming here. And Guns N' Roses were definitely one of them. It's a pity Red Hot Chili Peppers are not coming here, but still.
Well, if they don't come, we will go to them.
Yes, that's the...
Brazil is not that far.
That's the idea, that's the plan. But definitely let's hope that everything goes well in Rio today. Because I heard they canceled some day offs from the policeman. People... like literally on vacation being returned to their posts, so to ensure that everything will be fine. And that's what everyone expects too. Yeah. Everyone having a good time, enjoying Brazilian music or the rock from California or the soccer match, whatever. Yeah. Everyone has a good time.
Yeah. That's the objective, that everyone just, have fun and not really fight with each other.
Yes.
Nobody... I think most people don't want to get into fights or want any confusion while, they want to have fun. Of course, maybe a very small minority go to those places hoping that something might happen.
Yeah.
Like looking for trouble.
But I
guess the vast majority don't want that. Of course not.
I've heard that a huge number of people attending the soccer match, they don't have tickets, and they have that hope of maybe buying a last minute ticket there, but it's, of course, it won't fit everyone in that stadium, that's for sure. So they will be around, so gotta keep eyes on everything just to ensure everything will be fine. That's what we expect.
That's very nice. And before we actually start, I also wanted to ask, how was the party, how to say, the witch party, the Halloween party.
The Halloween party.
The witch party. I was missing the word.
We can't deny that there were a lot of witches there, for sure. A lot of witches.
Did you go as a witch?
Priests. No, this time I repeated a costume, something that I don't normally like to do, but I played the costume of the Joker again.
Okay, that's nice.
But I like to be creative about costumes. But some of the costumes really take a lot of time, and I didn't have much time on that day preparing a lot of things. So it's good because it's easier to just prepare the suit, the face painting. Everything looks fine. And Halloween's always a good time. It's becoming more and more popular. People are waiting for Halloween to come. They already know October is coming, so Halloween is coming. They automatically connect both things.
I mean, not me. I'm not that big of a fan of Halloween, but it's
but honestly saying, we have fun, but kids, they have a lot of fun. I can guarantee that.
They are the ones who have the most fun, right?
For sure.
With the candies and everything, with the costumes.
If you think about their communities, there are gated communities here in the city where they organize with everyone to go so can you do the hunt for candies, the trick or treats. And it's really fun because it really imitates the spirit. Even nowadays in the USA, kids don't go house to house knocking for candies as they used to do in the past, because of course times are different. We have other security concerns. But in a gated community, you can pretty much guarantee that. So
they're safe. Pretty safe inside. So
it happens, and they live the spirit of Halloween, which is cool. It's fun because kids, they love to play tricks. They're always teasing each other, playing about the costumes and this kind of stuff. It's good.
That's
good.
Nice.
They do have
that's very nice. So I want to say, Celso, thank you for coming to the show, to Casting Thoughts. If you're watching this and you're like, where are the other guys? We're doing today a different show with a guest, Celso. He's an English teacher, a very dear friend of mine. And we're here to talk about some stories that he had. Like he had a very interesting experience working on a cruise ship. And of course, it has many funny stories, interesting things to tell.
Absolutely.
And definitely very good tips for you guys who are learning English, who are here maybe to practice your listening skills. And yeah, he probably has some very good advice for you guys. And I don't know if Celso is familiar with the format of the show, but usually we start with a quote of the day.
Quote of the day.
And of course, I hid the quote from you because I wanted to get your, reaction, just an honest,
yeah,
spontaneous reaction. Yeah.
Let's go for it.
So the quote of the day for today is, if you talk to a man in a language that he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. And that is a quote from Nelson Mandela. You probably have heard of it, right? Have heard this.
For people who are not lucky enough for seeing him while he was alive, we still have many pieces of his legacy spread around media. One of my favorite actors, Morgan Freeman, played his role very decently, and I'm a particular fan of Mandela and all his thoughts. And this is a great example about talking to the person, and it's talking about language, which is something I've been studying since I can remember, since I was young, since I was a kid. And this is something unique because there are many ways to talk to a person, even without speaking the person's language. And I've seen several examples of this along my experiences abroad. I visited over 30 countries. Some of them...
Wow, 30 countries.
Yes. And some of these countries, they were not native speakers of English. So we couldn't always count on people speaking English in those countries. But of course, best advice I give you, learn English if you want to travel abroad.
English nowadays is almost like a lingua franca, right? The international language that everyone speaks.
Yes.
Like if you can go... Of course, if you go to small villages, maybe people are not going to be speaking. Even here in Brazil, we see like most people don't speak English. But if you want to travel abroad and you don't speak French, but you might be able to communicate with them in English, even though they don't like it that much in France, right? In Paris. But I mean, it's not like you're going to be hopeless in there,
I wouldn't say Paris. Paris, we got people from all over the world there.
Okay.
But I visited some small towns in France. I visited the whole south coast of France, and I've been to really small towns where they speak absolutely no English. And back then, I didn't have a good French as I do today, and it was tough. But again, going back to this topic, you really talk to people by your body language, by everything you can show, by just excuse me, or being kind, giving people time to talk, look in people's eyes, somehow try to understand that. Nowadays it's easier if you got your phone and you got an internet connection, you can pretty much do everything. That's how people do nowadays. But again, it's about talking to the person, giving them more than just language, giving their time, showing that you are interested in listening to them.
Yeah, that's the key thing, showing that you're interested, that you want to understand what they're saying. And of course, if you're at a foreign country and then you're trying to speak their language, you show some appreciation. They're going to see that, wow, he's really trying hard to speak this language, that that my own language. So
there are icebreakers.
Yeah.
If you have a couple of icebreakers, learn in whatever country you're going. You need to learn basic stuff like excuse me, thanks, sorry. These basic words, these basic phrases help. They help a lot.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, it's a great thing to do, to try to speak. You might not be able to speak it fluently, but if you're trying like a few words here and there, then
Of course.
you're gonna appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People feel more welcome when they hear their language.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I bet. Yeah, exactly. So, another thing that we like to do in this channel is have some fun facts just to we can like discuss. We might agree with them. Sometimes we disagree because these studies are not very technical, in my opinion. Sometimes it's just stuff that I find online that are interesting.
Okay.
And can spark some conversation. But these one, I think they're pretty spot on. Like everybody who studies languages, they have heard this before. So fun fact number 1, bilingual brains are more efficient, right? Efficient in what sense? You're using your brain, you're making that great effort to learn another language, that you're literally creating extra neuron connections. So you're like becoming more intelligent by learning another language. And even there are some studies that show that you can prevent or at least reduce the risk of getting dementia in the future as an older person, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you're learning a second language, a third, a fourth, you're actually taking care of your brain health, your mental health, right?
I'm very happy to have this said once again. It's just clarifying this for people to know that some people who get into contact with me, they're doing this because of doctor's orders.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I have students over 60 years old, and even before that, we all should start learning a second language, learning how to play an instrument, learning something that takes your mind working out of the ordinary. That's going to be expanding. That's going to be systematic, and that's when learning a language comes in. It's a brilliant exercise for your mind.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing, especially if you're an older person over 60 and you're probably retired. You're not required because of your job to do research and read all the time. You might get a little bit accustomed to not just relax and travel here and there, maybe talk to a few friends, but not have a challenge. You're learning something else, something new, right, for your job. And I mean, that's an amazing thing. And I never heard anyone saying that doctors prescribe their patients to learn a second language. Of course, we see that on the news all the time of the benefits of people learning, but like an actual doctor, prescribing that's
it's preventing Alzheimer most of the times. It's where learning a second language comes in. And one thing I can guarantee, it's never too late for anyone to learn a second language.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Some people have this old prejudice, and it just slows them down. And it's about encouragement. I must say it's not easy for majority of people when they're after they're 60. Of course, it will be easier if you were younger, especially when it comes to listening. Just talking about something that it's physiologically proven, but of course you can learn.
Kids are like sponges; they absorb everything.
Yeah, it's about your listening. Easier. The older you get, your listening gets worse and worse according to how you age. That's nothing we can do about it. It's just our body aging.
Yeah,
but I mean.
So far, we cannot do anything about it.
Yeah,
but maybe in the future, I don't know. I've heard that there are studies of people trying to, increase the span of human life, and then I don't know. Maybe we can do something about how do you call those cells that can transform that
stem cells?
Stem cells. Yeah, maybe we can use that kind of technology to, renovate our ear.
Yeah, our listening capacity.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
But it's always something good to encourage older people to learn a second language. I do encourage not only as an activity for the brain, but as a routine. As you probably know, it's really important for especially retired people to have a routine. And most of them who I see having a healthy lifestyle, they do have their routines and they follow everything by the book, and they are very dedicated to this. And
yeah,
it's something that really gives us an extra boost.
Yeah,
to teach them.
Nice. That is nice. Yeah, amazing. And that relates to the second fun fact, which is polyglots have unique brain patterns. So people who are proficient in multiple languages often exhibit unique brain patterns. And this is shown in brain scans, right? That the brain literally changes when you're learning a second, a third, fourth language. It's really amazing what something that feels like, oh, it's stupid. You're just learning a language, but you're literally like changing the patterns of your brain, creating more brain mass, like more brain. Yeah.
Again, no surprise at all. I've seen studies about the areas of your brain that are activated while you are learning and talking a second language, a third language. It expands pretty much when you are watching something that is completely new to you. For example, if you're watching a video of something that's going to change the world completely, and you get really focused and really aware of what's going on, your brain works differently. And when they compare the images, it's the same good feeling when you're learning something that makes sense to you. For example, I already know 2 words in English. Let's get an example that all my students love. When they realize it is that simple, they think, oh my God, I've been saying this my whole life, but I never really connected those 2 words individually. Afternoon. We are here today in the afternoon. And when they learn that the word noon itself, it's 12 p.m. So afternoon is actually after 12 p.m.
Yeah.
Which they never really pay attention to it. But when they disconnect afternoon to after and the word noon, it makes a lot of sense, because the afternoon is the time after 12 p.m. So why, Eureka!
Yeah, English has those kind of things, right? They combine words to create new words, and sometimes it's very descriptive. It makes a lot of sense.
Yes, there are several examples.
Which relates to our third fun fact, which is English. And I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I saw this in many different sources, that the English language has the most words. And it's probably due to the fact that you can combine words and even as we're talking and then we see something funny, I don't know, we can just create a word or a verb out of a noun. It's something very, very funny in English to me. Even when I first heard my cousin who speaks fluent English, she's like, yeah, I'm going to Uber to my house. I'm like, I'm going to Uber. Is Uber a verb? And I was like, yeah, you can do that in English. Yeah. So it's even very hard to count how many words there are in the English language, because every day you might be, creating different words.
Especially in the USA. Especially in the USA. Yeah. When it comes to apps, I remember in the very beginning of this, Skype people. Oh, I'm going to Skype you later. Yeah. I'm going to, I will be just mentioning several other brands here, but every brand that they actually have one specific communication, they make a verb out of it. Mm-hmm. And even for simple things like a chair, we know a chair, a bench. And we know the verb to sit, but it's common to say, I've been chaired here for hours.
Yeah.
People say this normally, and this is something interesting about English. You can create verbs about almost every word.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's another interesting thing that I saw when I was reading about this is the word variance, right? And this gets many people when they're learning because they see the spelling of a word, for example, read and read in the past tense.
Okay.
So like if you don't know the context, like you don't know exactly if you're talking about read in the present or something that's been already read,
Yeah.
you know, in the past. So it's like you need to learn how to read the context, to read the words in the context, to know how to pronounce it. Wind, now like for example, another wind and wind, it has the same spelling.
Yeah, same spelling.
Wind is, you know, the air moving, and then wind is something completely,
rewind.
yeah, completely different. So yeah, English has those interesting things.
Live, live.
Live and live, yeah.
There are other words, and it's some
there are many words. Yeah.
Even though we had those examples we mentioned, there are again many other words that they have different prefix and suffix, and so the universe you can expand from those words is I wouldn't be I wouldn't be happy about checking and updating English dictionaries because I'm sure that's going to be a tough work to do.
Yeah, especially with the you were saying before, the apps that they use, they might create a new word or new inventions if you invent something.
And reuse words, redefine words as well.
Redefine words as well, yeah. Yeah, and if you're I don't know, creating a new product and then we don't have, this is a completely new thing, you might create a new word.
Correct.
And that spreads to every other language in the world, especially if this word is created in the US. And if that word is completely new, chances are people are not going to try to translate or create a different word in their own language. They're just going to use that English word and incorporate it right into their language.
Wi-Fi.
How do you translate that?
Recently asked you about Wi-Fi. You just change the pronunciation when it goes to different languages.
Yeah.
But Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi.
Bluetooth.
Bluetooth, yeah.
You could translate that into Portuguese, but it wouldn't make any sense, right?
Yes. It's easier to do like that.
Just use the English word, yeah. All right, so this I just wanted to remind you guys that this channel doesn't have the objective to teach English. We're just here having a conversation like we're having right now and exposing you guys to the English language. So hopefully you can improve your listening skills. Even though we're not native speakers, right? But I mean, it might be easier if you're trying to learn because sometimes native speakers, they speak so fast. And if your English level is intermediate, it's so hard to follow. I remember when I was learning, the very first time that I went outside Brazil in the airplane, the flight attendant, because I was sitting by the emergency exit.
All right.
And then she came to me, she was trying to say something about, if like in case of emergency, you need to do this and that. And I thought I knew English and I couldn't, understand a little bit. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Sorry, like I couldn't understand anything. And she's like, oh, do you speak English? I'm like, yeah, a little bit. And then she made me move. She asked me to move and exchange seats with someone else because I wasn't able to understand her, And I mean,
I'm so glad you're here today talking in English because that sounds like a very embarrassing situation.
A little bit. A little bit.
Some people will just refrain from sitting on those seats and will just maybe be traumatized by, oh my God, I couldn't understand the flight attendant.
But I think if I remember, no, I'm not sure. I don't think she put me by the window. No. But if she had put me by the window,
she would sit you by the aisle.
That's probably by the aisle, yeah. So I wasn't lucky to get in one ICU. But yeah, you guys, that's the whole purpose of the show. And I have the wrong thing here.
It's funny you're mentioning about these experiences about understanding English, what I always say to people, I'm going to mention some examples about the cruise ship experiences, but you really need to make sure you are speaking an English that's good enough for people to understand you. Mm-hmm. And it goes to native speakers, because I've experienced in many situations native speakers talking on a table like this one we're talking right now, and we had people from all over the world, and people literally saying, "Excuse me, I'm not understanding what you're saying," mm-hmm. because they come from different countries. Some of them come from the countrysides, really small towns, mm-hmm. where the accent is even stronger. So I can guarantee this is not something that native speakers have an upper hand.
Yeah,
we are maybe sounding even more clear to people who are learning a second language.
I guess so. And in my case, I of course, English is not my native language, and I have to think a little bit mm-hmm. before I speak. Not that I'm translating in my head, but it's just like I need to have some time to form the words and like really think about what I'm going to say. So that makes me speak a little bit slower than I normally would in my own mother tongue, right?
Yeah.
So that helps someone who's learning English to really understand what I'm saying, and because I'm not going to be like rambling the words too much. Yeah. Even though I do that, I tend to do that, but probably much less than an American, person, for example.
Absolutely, yeah. We normally take some time to organize the ideas, but it's something that you can adjust according to who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And that's something we have this natural idea by doing this, because it's not our first language. On the other hand, a native speaker possibly wouldn't have the same feeling, mm-hmm. because if it's that person's only language, it wouldn't work. Because I'm just talking the way I always talk. You're supposed to understand me. That's it.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess sometimes in the US, because they have so many foreigners there, it's not something new to them to have a foreigner. Here, I notice, at least I tend to do that. If I'm talking to someone, a foreigner in Portuguese, and I know that Portuguese is not their first language, and they're still in the learning process, I tend to speak more clearly, mm-hmm. a little bit slower, because we're not used to having that. And we know like Portuguese is not an easy language.
Yes.
But I guess for Americans, sometimes it's like, okay, it's every day they're there. There's a bunch of foreigners. They're used to it. It's not something new. It's not like they're going to really care as much, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm saying bullshit here, but I know that's my perspective on, and when I was there.
You're not. I guess you're just mentioning something that's cultural. We are a very welcoming, warming nation, mm-hmm. and Brazilians in general are very welcoming to all foreigners. Mm-hmm. And it's about the country's specific, taboos. Mm-hmm. So, of course, if you have any kind of prejudice towards a specific group of people, maybe it can play some part of it. So mm-hmm. people will be like, I'm not gonna spend my time talking to that person that I wouldn't like to be here.
Yeah,
it goes to this point of view sometimes.
Yeah.
But the idea of being helpful, it's greater, I believe. Mm-hmm. We have some people talk and refer to this like worldwide. The vast majority of people are trying to help, but of course you're going to see some people that are not interested in talking to you if you're not speaking their language, which is natural. You just have to keep the head up and move forward.
Maybe try to find someone else to help you.
Of course.
Having some trouble.
Of course. Basic. Don't panic.
Yeah. And of course you speak that from experience. You said you traveled to over 30 countries.
Yeah.
And you also worked on a cruise ship. So tell us about that experience, because That is a very interesting experience.
It's when I was thinking about the stories because I spent over 4 years on this job, and on the cruise ship life itself, only if you were just like living on the ship, you would be experiencing so many cool stories, and that would be enough. Even if we never leave the ship to go ashore, to go onto land, you still have a lot of cool stories. But I'm trying to talk about to mix a little bit of both.
Yeah.
First of all, working on a cruise ship, it's something that I encourage people to do, even though we have some people that you'll be thinking twice about setting a foot on the ship because, of course, it's a ship. It's a moving surface. So some people can get seasick, which is okay. If you were just there for 7 days vacation trip, but if you're working there for 6 months, 7 months, which is more common when we're talking about the length of the contracts, that's something you really should take into consideration.
Yeah, imagine getting seasick during all that time. It's impossible if you're gonna work on the ship.
But there's something we call sea legs.
Sea legs.
Sea legs, yes. So getting sea legs, it means that you are no longer getting seasick.
Okay.
It's a matter of getting used to it.
So you can get used to it. If
of course.
Someone who,
even if you're a person that gets seasick, even like when you are riding in the back seat of a car. I know people who cannot read anything if they're sitting inside a simple car moving on a flat road. They feel sick about that. And I know people like that they go on a ship and they get perfectly fine under medication. So if you're taking the right medication, you don't feel nauseous, you don't feel seasick at all. So
I am really glad that I don't get that because I don't like to take medication unnecessarily unless I'm with a very strong headache, for example, then that's when I'm going to take medication. But if I were to go on a boat, I'm traveling somewhere, or even, as you said, in the backseat of a car and maybe reading something and getting like that, getting sick all the time, and I had to take medication, man, that would be the worst for me.
And the worst. There are several sizes of ships. I worked what was at the time the biggest cruise ship in the whole world.
Yeah. At the time, when was it exactly?
It was 2014. 2014. They built that. They tried to break their own record, so they built the ship like maybe 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters bigger than the last one.
Just like big enough, a little bit, just
break the record. To break the record. So that's basically it's the same format, the same shape, the same division of decks. The deck plan is very similar.
Maybe an extra layer of paint would be enough to make it a little bit
just to keep selling the new thing. Oh, that's the newest, biggest. Yeah,
get excited. I'm gonna be the largest ship on the
world. We have some people who are always going to cruise ships basically every weekend. We have people who are always like going from cruise to cruise, and they fall in love with it. So it's basically it's an all-inclusive resort. So you have all kinds of services on board the ship. We're talking about getting seasick. Did you know that we could play pool on the ship?
Yeah,
a game of pool. Yes, you can go for it because we do have enough technology to observe the waves. At some point, that the balls on the table will not roll; they will not move. They will be completely stable.
Wow.
Those stabilizers, they can hold. Of course, if you are in rough seas, that's going to be harder. But the bridge, the navigation bridge, they always follow the best possible path and they, of course, they don't want rocky waters.
Yeah. I mean, of course, nobody wants that. Yeah. People probably start panicking if the waters are too rough. Have you experienced like a very rough storm that, things were rolling around, people falling on the floor, something like that, something crazy?
Never experienced. I was lucky enough for not experiencing this kind of rocky waters. But it was rocky enough for not walking on a straight line.
Okay.
If I try to go straight, like we have the main avenue of the ship, it's called I-95. It's basically it's based on the I-95 highway in the USA. So this would connect the ship almost like from bow to stern, which is the front to the back of the ship. And that main avenue, you see people from all departments walking up and down.
Okay,
it's amazing. If you're having the chance right now, just Google it. Go to I-95 from any cruise ship. This is the main avenue, so you see a lot of trolleys going up and down. People carrying trays full of different dishes. You see absolutely everyone working on the ship walking on that huge avenue. And when we are experiencing this kind of waters, of course, the captain makes an announcement saying that we are experiencing these rough waters, and you guys should be careful. And it's like that. You just go side to side, trying to
that must be
keep a straight line.
Funny sight to see.
Yes. So as long as no one gets hurt, it's part of the fun,
Yeah.
And honestly saying, I spent many nights on a cruise ship. I have never experienced anything better to fall asleep.
Okay.
I don't know if it's because you get tired, of course. Mm-hmm. We most of crew members, they work around 8 to 10 hours averagely. On some days we could work 12 hours. It depends. It varies to most of the crew members. And if you were after a long work shift, you just go to bed and you fall asleep like instantaneously. I remember
you feel like a little baby on the crib, like rocking your mom, rocking you back and forth.
Yes, it wouldn't take a minute to fall asleep. Okay. It was amazing.
I think that would help me. I like that, especially if I'm laying on a hammock, for example. It's moving a little bit. It's so relaxing. It's very good.
Yes, it's really good, especially because of the temperature of the ship. It's everything. It's AC controlled, and beds are comfortable. Everything is. It's if you were cruising, if you're not working, if you're not a crew member, I can guarantee that they will have great queen size, king size beds as well. The best ones I ever tried in my life were on the ship.
Nice, that's amazing. On average, how many crew members are there on the ships that you?
Yeah, it depends on the boats. It depends on the ship. We the smallest one that I worked at, we had a total of 2,000 passengers. For a number of crew members of 700 to 800. It could vary because depending on the itinerary, you might need more or less crew members.
700 for 2,000 people. The 2,000 passengers will get 7 to 800.
Yes.
Wow.
Crew members working for them.
Wow.
But
I never thought it was that many.
Yes, but I have also the comparative of the biggest one I worked at. It was a total of 5,000 guests and 2,000 crew members.
Wow. Did you get to meet all those, people when you were working? Or
actually not.
I probably would work more closely with a small.
Yeah, you get in touch with a smaller group. We have divisions on the cruise. We have the cruise division. We have F&B, which is food and beverage. We have the cast. Every cruise ship, you have amazing cast working from dancers, musicians, magicians. You have people working in different kinds of shows there.
That's a fun part.
Yes, we had the ice cast. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago, saying that we had an ice skating ring on the ship, and that friend was like, "Wow, you had an ice skating ring on the ship?" Yeah, we not only had that available for the guests, but also for the cast because they performed on that, and it was an amazing show. Also, the Aqua Theater, which was a high diving show mixed with dancing, and also divers there performing different shows. And we had the regular theater, so we can pretty could pretty much say that there were 3 different casts for these. Not to mention their partnership with DreamWorks. So you also had some parades with the DreamWorks characters. It's just a lot of entertainment.
Every day there's a different activity. It's always busy. There's always something for you to see.
When you
never get bored as a passenger. I mean,
you got options for everyone. They have the Cruise Compass. Cruise Compass is a daily informative about all the activities going on, which is planned by the cruise director and the activities manager. They both work hard on planning all the activities and having different options for different kinds of people, so everyone gets entertained there.
Nice, yeah.
But you talked about the number of crew members. We had closer contact with one specific division. In my case, it was a cruise division. The cruise division was formed by the cruise staff, the youth staff, sports staff, and stage staff. So we're all working on the entertainment of people.
Okay. Yeah. So that was you work in the entertainment division.
Correct.
And which staff exactly?
It was working
several ones or specific ones?
We had our main role. I was a sports staff. I was working on sports staff, and then stepped up to sports. We had back there we had a sports manager and sports supervisor.
Okay.
Some ships they had the manager because they were huge. The team would be like 20 staff working, and on smaller ships you had like only 3. So just one sports supervisor was enough.
Okay. Right.
Because there was a rock wall, there was a ping pong table, mini golf, shuffleboard. Have you ever heard about shuffleboard?
No.
Shuffleboard it's a game. It reminds a lot of curling. If you've ever seen people playing curling, you know that sport that people they glide on the ice and they release that stone that looks like a pan.
Also, like they try to make maybe the surface a little bit smoother so the thing can move.
It's on the deck.
That they want.
Yeah, it's on the open deck, but they use sticks.
Okay.
So you just push the disc, and you have to get the disc in that area which you're going to score. So it's going to be pretty much like playing curling.
Okay.
But on the ship.
Yeah, seems fine. seems fun.
Yes. This one, it's just a simple one, but we had other activities. I mentioned rock climbing wall, but we also had...
That will probably be my favorite, the rock climbing.
Yeah, I know you like that.
Yeah, I love it.
We also had the surfing simulator, which was
simulator.
At my experience, the most popular one.
Yeah.
Because
everybody wants to try it. Nobody knows how to do it. Everybody falls.
It's of course there were several wipeouts. People were just literally diving into that water, and it's a lot of fun. Everyone likes to go there to see people laughing from their their fall. And I remember in high season, people waiting in line for 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
30 minutes to get like a 10 seconds ride and go back.
Get one goal only, and then
Yeah,
have to go back and
exactly.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
Not have the patience for that.
I wouldn't recommend you guys, particularly to try to go on a high season cruise because you got long lines all the time. And I experienced something. You talked about the bad experiences. I got to mention about GI. A lot of people don't know what GI is. It's a virus. If you get contaminated by GI virus,
GI.
No, GI. So the GI, you experience diarrhea, headache, and stomachache as well. I never had this virus, so I can't really say what it feels like, but that's what I heard from people.
Sounds like food poisoning almost.
It spreads along surfaces in the air.
Okay.
But especially surfaces because it's not very contagious that you have to block like the whole air conditioner. But if you experience a number of 6 reports in 6 hours, or if it affects 6% of the population of the ship starts a different operation for GI prevention, where guests are not allowed to touch any kind of button. So if you enter the elevator, you're going to have a staff there wearing mask, of course, that you have to tell the person which floor, which deck you're going. So that person will push the button for you. If you're going to restaurants, you cannot serve yourself. Someone will be serving. So it's, it's not the same experience. It's really bad when it happens. They cancel a couple of activities where people got closer. And after the ship docks at the end of the cruise, of course, they have to go through a really, really severe cleaning, deep cleaning, to make sure they eliminate the virus.
What a bummer. But tell us about the good sides, the funny stories. I'm interested in knowing the interesting things that you experienced there, not the virus stuff. No.
Forget about virus. We experienced. we had enough bad experiences about the pandemic.
Yeah.
Well, going on cruise ships is a fun thing. I strongly recommend because a lot of people say, "Oh, I want to travel around the world, but that's going to cost me a lot, and I don't have enough money for that." And I don't know what do I have to do. I always tell them, trust your English. Just improve your English. If, of course, you can handle those pre-requirements of working on board, which are you must go, if you're a Brazilian, you must go through a training course that you have to afford. Called STCW. This STCW, it's basically a course that you have to learn survival techniques on open hours in open waters. You have to learn how to put up a fire. So if you have a fire, you have to have this training with the firefighters. Also, you need to learn about first aid. So these are just like the very basic elementary stuff that you must do. And you also have one last test, but a lot of people chicken for that. I experienced that. That is walking the plank.
Walking the what? Sorry?
The plank.
The plank?
Like the pirates.
Oh, really?
Walk the plank. I'm just kidding. You don't have to. You don't have to jump from the open deck. Normally, the open deck. The first open deck, it's deck 5. So if you jump overboard from deck 5, you have a high chance of getting seriously injured.
Yeah.
But on deck 4, you have to jump, if I'm not sure, from the 3 meters high platform.
Okay.
So 3 meters high.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but I've been like 3 meters high, like in over water, and like, I'm gonna jump like this lake or whatever, and it's scary, It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're up there 3 meters seems like a lot.
When vertigo comes up and people get
if you're scared of heights, I am scared of heights, and man, I don't know. But if you're jumping in water, like are you diving? Like, do you have a special technique? First, like
they teach you the right technique because you are supposed, of course, to protect yourself, and you also need to pass it on to the guests in case of an emergency. So you have to wear the life vest, and when you are jumping into the water, you have to keep your head protected. So you use your arm, you basically hug your own neck just to avoid an injury when you were landing on the water. So it's basically this. But the problem is when people look down and they paralyze.
Yeah.
And you have
the feeling.
Yes, you have to really overcome this object you have.
And that's probably why they have you do this prior, because if you actually have to do it in an emergency, like, okay, I've done it before, so I can do it now.
And the ship also provides these trainings regularly. It depends, of course, of the safety officer. We have a safety officer that runs emergency drills regularly on ships. And that's something that you must know beforehand. Every crew member must be familiar with all the procedures, like regular aircraft crew we were talking about earlier. They are always need to be training this. So if you can basically succeed in all those tests, you can enter the ship, and then where the fun begins. You get in touch with people from all over the world. That's something that is really interesting on cruise ships. Sometimes in cargo ships, when you have cargo ships, you have people mostly from Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia. You got Indians. You got specific countries that almost all ships, cargo ships, they do have people from these countries because they're more familiar. It's more in their culture to have people working on these ships. But when it goes to cruise ships, you definitely have people from different countries, different cultures, and most of the itineraries, they visit different continents. So when you have that itinerary, you know that, maybe for 6 months, we call a season. For that season, we need a majority of crew from one specific country or one specific region. But again, you need people from different countries. I remember seeing people from Nepal already.
Oh, wow.
A country that I never thought about visiting. That they were working on ships.
Nice.
And it's really cool because it improves a lot your listening.
Definitely. Yeah, being exposed to all these different accents, that your brain is trying to interpret that like as the English language, because when we're learning, we're used to either American or British English. And then you get like an African person, an Asian person speaking English with their accent, and you're like, what? But you get used to it. It improves a lot.
It improves a lot. And you can tell after some time, of course, you can tell from where the person is. Just by talking to the person. If you listen to a couple of words, you already know where the person is from, unless that person has a really good accent, really good pronunciation. And another good thing about that is when you're working on board, you don't have to pay for the bills. So it means free meals, free medical assistance. You have life insurance. You have all kinds of insurance that you would need to work in international waters. And the only thing that you really have to pay for is for your personal hygiene items. They don't provide you things like toothpaste, toothbrush, these specific things, shampoo. You got to buy your own. But other than that, everything is fine.
I guess it's better because most people are very particular with what kind of toothpaste they want to use, what kind of shampoo, especially women. They're going to have all those, the beauty products. So it makes sense that they're not going to provide those. So
that's the only. These are the only things you really need to have a budget for. But other than that, I know people who go on ships literally just to make money. They don't care about going out and visiting the ports of call. They just go there to make money, and
and you make good money, right?
You really make good money, and you make that money in US dollars.
Okay.
So depending from where you come from, it means a lot. From other countries, not that much. We have people from Scandinavian countries or Europe or even the
when the
UK.
currency is very similar, but like compared to ours,
Yes, exactly.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of people go there just for the experience, So this is the focus of people from other countries where the US dollar is much more expensive than their current currency, their local currency.
Yeah. I think it's very nice when you are able to be in that kind of environment with many different cultures. It makes you appreciate and understand and even not be as judgmental, because of course everybody has those stereotypes about every culture in the world. But then when you actually meet a person from that country, you're going to see a lot of the stereotypical things, of course, but you're going to know that they're much more than that.
Yeah.
It's not only the stereotypes. They're not only the stereotypes. There's a lot more. Because I remember meeting some guys from Africa, and obviously we have that image of Africa. It's everybody's poor and hungry all the time. The children are starving. So of course that is part of most African countries, but there's also the beauty of the countries. Like they're able to show you how beautiful it is, and some cities like in countries like South Africa, how rich some cities are and how smart they are too. Because sometimes we feel like they're living in, I don't know, like hunter-gatherers, thousands of years ago. But no, like that, they have cities like everywhere else. They're studying, they're very smart. There's, of course, poor people, rich people. You learn about their culture. You learn to be more respectful, I think. Especially with different points of view, because everybody's going to have a different approach to life, different opinions. And you're like, I've never thought about that in that perspective. So you learn to appreciate how people think and, all that.
And we do have rules on board the ship. So if you are also a little bit afraid of one specific country's culture or anything like that, or what it could be, if you are maybe unsafe about something, the company, they have very strict rules that must be followed. So maybe if you are afraid of religious or sexual orientation, anything that in your country could be a problem, over there, that's not a problem at all. Okay. It's open to everyone, which is something amazing, I guess. Yeah. So everyone, amazing. There's room for everybody on board the cruise ship.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And even another thing that I like, that most of companies, they don't have age limitation. So as far as you're being productive, if you can perform, fulfill your duties, you can still work on ships.
Nice, that's amazing. And did you know you knew English before working on a cruise ship, right?
Yes, and that's something we must talk about. That I always say that the better your English, the better will be your salary. There are some positions that you apply for, you must have fluent English.
Okay.
And some other positions that you could apply for that you don't need that fluent English. That we have a division called front of the house and back of the house on ships. So if you are working in back of the house, it means that normally you don't need very fluent English. It doesn't mean you're not gonna make a lot of money. It all depends on specific positions.
Okay.
So, for example, housekeepers. Mm-hmm. Housekeepers, they do make a lot of money because they work on tips.
Oh, okay.
I would know some housekeepers making around $7,000, $8,000 a month.
Wow.
Same goes for head waiters, because you have a lot of people working at the restaurants there, and we had people making something like 6,000, 7,000. But again, they work for tips. So tips,
Okay.
if you
It's
get
not a guarantee.
yeah, if you're working on an itinerary where people tip a lot, normally Americans, they all tip a lot.
Yeah, it's in their culture.
Yeah.
And Brazilians tip that much for not. They're
Yeah,
used to
yeah.
that.
But some of the ships they do something that they demand, like the tips, like they preset the tips with the ticket. When you buy a ticket to the cruise ship, you already have to pay the tips like beforehand.
Okay.
So of course the crew members won't feel that much in their wages. So it depends. It really depends. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to make a lot of money. But on the other hand, you have to, of course, work hard, work really hard.
Yeah, I bet.
And then
A few
some,
hours of sleep and
yes. But if you have, I always say, if you speak fluent English, you can apply for positions like the concierge, where you can make even more than these numbers that I mentioned. Because, of course, you were talking to a guest that you're going to be offering them something that's it's customized for them. So one specific experience, you get more money for that.
yeah,
That's for sure.
Yeah. But like going back to the English, you knew some English, and of course you said it plays a big role, right, in how much money you're gonna make. But did you feel like you improved your English while working there?
You always do.
Your listening skills,
Yeah,
speaking skills.
absolutely. When it comes to different accents, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
you always improve. No doubt about that. You
Yeah.
always improve.
Yeah.
Because, as I said before, you get in touch with people from all over the world, and it improves a lot. I remember on the first month, I met a guy from the Philippines working on where we had to pick our uniforms.
Yeah.
And it's called the linen room, but the linen room is where you get bed sheets, pillowcases. They provided this kind of things. And you also get your uniform there. And I remember that guy from the Philippines. That's an example of back of the house. He was only working with crew members. He would never had contact with guests. And of course, his English wasn't the best.
Okay.
And I remember that sentence from him. I handed him my uniform request. So he needed to give me all the uniform I would need for the rest of the contract. And then he was saying to me, "No toxada pants, no toxada pants." And I was, "Could you say that again, please?" And he was pointing to the paper saying, "No toxada pants." Then I flipped it to me, and I was reading the paper. He was pointing to tuxedo pants.
Yeah.
Oh, so no tuxedo pants will be no tuxedo pants. So he didn't have the tuxedo pants I needed.
Oh, okay.
So I needed to wait for the next cruise so they would have my size.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you get in touch with these different accents. Of course, it's not a native accent, but it's still useful, very useful.
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah. I also had no, please go ahead.
Yeah, because of these, this was just in one situation, but that wasn't definitely not the hardest one to understand. I guess I mentioned to you once, my friend from Scotland, from the countryside of Scotland, really small town. He spoke English in such a way that everyone they were all confused about what he was saying, but it was his accent, his native accent.
Yeah.
Couldn't say anything about that. That was English officially. Yeah,
Officially, yeah.
But
And sometimes I see those videos on YouTube of Scottish people speaking, and it feels like they mix with their, I don't know, some other language, and you're like, I don't understand like anything that they're saying at all. Sometimes a few words here and there, but not the whole thing. Yeah.
yes, it's tough.
But I also had a similar experience with different accents when I was in the US. The very first time, the very first weeks, now the very first month, we were all international students, and we had to to take this course, this English course, to just improve before taking the actual classes for our majors.
Okay.
And we were at the doors in summer, and I remember meeting people from Egypt, Ghana, South Africa, from various countries in Latin America, and also the other countries like the Middle East too.
Okay.
And it's like I already had that experience at the airplane, in the airplane with the lady trying to talk to me about the emergency exit. And I would go there and hear all those accents. I'm like, man, I'm lost here. I don't know what I'm doing. But of course, I mean, not everybody spoke fluent English, and most people had their struggles because obviously everybody was there for the immersion course. Okay. And we felt like we were on the same boat, and everybody would speak a little bit slower, and like little by little, we would get used to each other's accents. And as you said, that you were able to recognize where people were from, I also acquired, I think, that at least regarding those specific nationalities. And it was amazing. It was very good to just improve my listening skills, my speaking skills. And most importantly, the culture aspect of it, getting in contact and learning about their cultures, their stories. Some people, sometimes they would cook their own food with whatever they could find in the US. Of course, they couldn't find the same ingredients, but they would try to make dishes very similarly as to how they would do at home, And I mean, it was just an amazing experience. So you often recommend people to go work on a cruise ship, and I'm always telling people, especially if they're young, like go do study abroad, do an exchange program, because you're gonna gain so much from it. And it might not even, it doesn't necessarily have to be financially gains, later on in their careers, but like personally, I think.
Of course,
you're growing as a person.
Yes, you grow because you get in touch with different cultures. Different mindsets, and of course you grow from that a lot.
And you also start to learn or to know yourself better. In contrast with other people and other cultures, you get to know yourself much better,
Of course.
And because you're away from your home, away from your parents, and from people who are taking care of you if you're very young, you learn by that too, by the challenges and having to make your food and, decide your own what you're going to do.
I would say this is a huge change if you got all of this at once. If, for example, if you live with your parents, if you never lived abroad, if you never spent, I would say, a month away from home, and if you're just going totally into the opposite direction of this, that could be a huge bomb just dropping right in your life.
Yeah.
So if you could reduce those things, because of course you're gonna feel homesick at some point, and maybe you have the language barrier to overcome, and then you have the cultural barrier. So there are many things happening together. It's always a better idea if you maybe live by yourself for some time, if you learn how to deal with some stuff. And of course, we were mentioning about growing after getting in touch with people from all over countries, from all over the world, from different countries. It goes to that idea of different mindsets, different ways of thinking. Of course, you do have contact with people all over your life, but most of them pretty much come from the same background as you come. And that's when it gets interesting, because you're going to see people from different upbringings.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, the personal development, I think there's nothing that compares with it. If you're not in your home country, because of all the challenges. Yeah, it's amazing. But of course, in my case, I mean, it wasn't that harsh, because I had never, or actually, I think I lived for a few months by myself before going there, so I did have some experience living by myself. But there you're not actually by yourself, totally by yourself, because of course you have the university taking care of you, and you have this monthly allowance. I wasn't working there. I was just studying there. So the struggle was not that, that bad, of a struggle. But yeah, if people go to work, then that's a totally different thing.
Not to mention that when you were working, you got totally different responsibilities. And they do have the 3 months probation period, which if you don't show enough skills after 3 months, they can fire you, and there's nothing you can do about that. I've seen people being fired after 3 months, and it was heartbreaking at some. It was heartbreaking at some point because I knew that, for example, that happened to a friend of mine that we became friends on the ship, that he was just unlucky to get on board during high season. As I mentioned, high season, crazy lines, crazy hours, everything is to the maximum. And he got there during that time when, of course, we needed extra staff for helping long lines. And his listening skills back then, they were not the best skills. So he was struggling to understanding people, and you gotta, act fast. It's just, get the first guess. So answer, deliver, just whatever the guest was needing, you had to solve it right away in the next line. So you have to be proactive, you have to be fast. And of course, if you're starting, you need some time to know that you get it.
Get into the rhythm.
Yes. And he was very unlucky because it was high season. So not saying that he had bad skills about getting the guests answered, but his listening skills were not the best ones.
Okay. Yeah.
So he was asking the guests to repeat over and over again. It upset the manager and got him fired at the time.
Yeah. How long did he last?
He stayed there for 2.5 months.
Yeah, it's enough time to get a real friendship. Because in those situations, it's interesting. You think, okay, 2 months, you barely know the person. Of course, you don't know the person that well. But because you're in that situation, away from home, and you're working closely with those people, the friendship, the bonds that you form are so strong. Because I remember that I was there for a month and a half during this immersion period. And some people, we didn't stay in the same university, because after this month and a half, every person went to a different university to stay the rest of the year. And some of these guys, they went to the same university as me. We became really good friends to this day. And some others, like I never saw them again. But during the time that we had, during the farewell, people were crying.
Oh, yes.
After a month and a half, it became so good.
It's amazing. It's so intense.
Crying, and it's like, my God, it's like we've been friends for, I don't know, forever, for years. And it had been a month and a half.
I always compared that to reality shows.
Yes.
And
so I kind of get it. Before I didn't get it. I'm like, oh, these people are faking it.
Yeah.
But after, then I understand.
It's similar to reality shows. I would say that's even closer to a reality show going on board a cruise ship, because over there you got cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
You got rules to follow, and you got the same kind of immersion, So it really resembles a reality show. Not to mention that we had people with different interests. And maybe people fighting for a common goal. Okay. So if they are trying to step up to a better working position, so of course they will not play fair. Yeah, there's competition involved. They maybe not play fair, but of course they will follow the rules of the company. But you gotta do your best, and that's really intense. Really intense. I've seen several love stories there, loads of arguments. Everything is really intense, and you must have a tremendous mental health to work and be organized, to be a person that can step up there, have that goal, your personal goal. Some people go there just for making money or visiting different countries, but some of them really need that job. As I was mentioning to you about the money they make, some people, unfortunately, they have to stay all this time away from home when they do have wife and children back home, but they don't have other job positions that they would make that much money in their countries. So it's a little sad, but they spend like their whole life working on ships, visiting their family for 3 weeks, and then go back for another 8 months, 9 months.
Okay. Oh wow, yeah. That's not an easy life.
That's not an easy
I
life.
can see myself doing it for a period of time, but maybe to make some money just with that objective. And of course, meeting people and getting to know, to see and visit other places, but not for years and years. No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I like to be grounded somewhere, like to have my roots in a city.
Yes, that's correct. I personally can mention the story of a cruise director. He, after 10 years working for the company, he decided to quit. And cruise director is the top position of the cruise division. You have cruise staff, activities manager, and the cruise director, which is the top one, the most popular face, even more popular than the captain.
Yeah.
And when you reach that position, normally the person stays for a long time because, of course, they make a lot of money, and it's a career that a lot of people dream about. And when he was resigning, when he was quitting, he personally told me that, I spent over 10 years here. I reached all my personal goals, but I unfortunately missed loads of graduation, senior proms, birthdays, weddings, all this stuff. And it's heartbreaking at some.
Yeah, I mean, nothing is perfect in life. So. But it was a nice experience, though.
Of course.
It was a great experience. Right?
Yes, but if you think about this gap in your life, like 10 years, it's a lot of time.
Yeah, 10 years. 10 years? 10 didn't you say 4? I thought I said 4.
No. My
case
was
case
4.
But his case 10 years.
It's over 10 years.
Yeah. All right, get it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
He was lucky, though, because he worked with his wife on board ships. Like couples are allowed to work on the same ship if you are married, legally married. So you just need to show the documents, and you can apply for a job position working with your spouse.
Okay.
Maybe not on the same division, but you could have your own cabin. So cabins are divided like this. You have most of cabins for doubles. And if you are married, of course, you can share the cabin with your spouse.
Got it. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. Well, since we're a little bit over time now, maybe we should talk about just quickly about some tips for people learning English and like how to improve their English. Yeah. Because again, he's an English teacher, guys, and I'm not an English teacher, as I said like many times before. But here we have someone with actual English teaching experience, with very useful tips, and yeah, let's hear from
all of
the master.
Yeah, so you're being very kind. The only thing I know that I'm always learning, and I will always be learning. That's something you gotta have in mind for you as well. You are always better today if you're doing the right thing. Of course, if you're dedicating to it, you'll be always better today than you were yesterday, and that's gonna be the same rhythm for the future. Gonna keep improving it over and over again. And the first thing I had in mind when you asked me about English tips is about, if you're listening to me and if you're understanding me barely, you know some English, which is good. But I always ask people, how did you learn English? How did you get to learn? Because a lot of people say, I learned English very easily. That's super easy. I'm just making no effort at all. Great. It means that you got some skills about it. And I know a lot of people who suffer a lot. They wouldn't be understanding almost a word that I'm saying right now. And that's when you really show your skills as a teacher, because Some people, they are self-learners. I'm a good example of this. I'm going to ask you about that, but just sharing with you what happened to me personally. I learned English basically from video games, music, internet contact. I wasn't born in Wi-Fi, as I guess.
Yeah, I was not.
Yes, I would say that's even easier for people nowadays. Back there, when I was a teenager, when I was a kid, I always had that hunger for learning more and more. I guess the fuel you need is your curiosity. If you're curious, if you're not satisfied with not knowing what's going on that movie, on that song, on that game, you seek answers. And that's what I did back there with the dictionary, searching word by word. And this is just part of the learning because you're receiving. I know a lot of people who say the same thing to me. They always say, but Celso, I played a lot of video game when I was young. But I actually learned some words, but I don't know how to speak. But that's the thing. You're just receiving. You're just listening. Sometimes you're reading, but you're not speaking. You're not writing anything. You're not typing anything.
Yeah, not actually actively trying to use the language, like you're saying, like trying to translate the words and look at the dictionary and stuff like that.
And this could be challenging. This really could be challenging because we could have a problem if that happens. Because if you overlearn listening and reading, maybe you have a difference about your speaking, which is sometimes it's not easy to catch up with. But tell me about you. How did you learn English?
Yeah, just before that, because we're having a bit of a technical problem. No, she got it. Yeah, just plug into the good. Yeah, I learned in the regular way, actually. I went to a language school, English language school, and here in our hometown, and I studied for 3 years. Was it that? Yeah. Or 2.5. It was like either 2.5, between 2.5, 3 years. And but I didn't reach fluency.
How old were you again?
I was around 16 to 17. Yeah. So it was between 17 and 20 that I took English classes here. But I didn't reach that fluency level. And even my listening skills were not good. I tried to speak as much as I could, but I had classes once a week.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course you need to study. You can't learn a language only studying during that time once a week. You need to be proactive.
You need to think about the time of contact with English.
Yes.
Some people ask me, do I learn if I take classes once a week? I said, you do. But if you take classes once a week, and this 1 hour a week is not the only time you are in touch with English.
Yeah.
So what I'm talking is you must have more time to be in touch with the language.
Exactly.
If you're just in touch with English 1 hour a week, I'm not saying that you will not learn, but you will learn slower or maybe not learn.
It's going to take forever. It's good to do every day, at least, even if it is for 15 minutes. But if you're doing it constantly, almost every day, then you're going to learn a lot better than just once a week.
Yes.
And at the time when I was studying, I tried to do that, but I was also in school, university, college, and working as well. So I didn't have a lot of time, but I didn't do the homework and stuff like that. But when I went to the US, it was when I really got to improve my listening skills, speaking skills, even like reading skills, writing skills, because I took English classes there as well, but not English for foreigners, as though someone was learning English, for just academic writing. And that was, in the beginning, the first month, yes, it was English for as a second language, but during the rest of the year, it was writing, academic writing. And that was challenging, very challenging, but it was very good. You'll grow when something is more challenging.
Of course.
It's too easy.
And this is about learning any language. You need to set the challenge. That challenge, that's why people ask me sometimes, oh, can I learn English from movies? Can I learn English from series? And I always say, well, if you learn only from that, it means that you really have skills. Because you set the challenge that is normally very hard, because there are several sentences there, and maybe we'll learn only a word or two. But again, there are several ways of learning. If you're asking me this, you were asking about, oh, can I learn just by the fun way? Because I learned English the fun way.
Yeah.
I was playing video games. I was just having fun, getting involved with the story. Again, curious. You must be curious. That's okay.
Yeah.
Nobody's hurt. Everything is all right. So if you're just learning the fun way, it means that you're gonna be fine about that. But again, you gotta be curious. You gotta be asking yourself, and that's how you actually improve. If you're just watching series, if you're just trying to improve from movies or from music or from games, it doesn't matter. You need to be a little more systematic about that. So taking notes and learning, a quick tip I can give you about notes, it's try both. A lot of people take notes and they write the translation of words right in front of it. And they keep making a long list of words that I'm learning from that movie or that game, whatever. And writing with that translation, it's not very, by my experience, not very good. Because the people who try to do the same thing, but not writing the translation in front of it, they learn much more. Because every time they were adding a new word to their list, they were supposed to check all the other old words that they previously they took notes over there. So by checking the words you once learned, you review that word, and you were supposed to, of course, remember that word. And if you're just with the translation of that word in front of it, you don't think about that. So that's where you get, oh, what's that again? So always write just the word, don't write the translation of it.
And something that I usually tell people, translation, it could be okay if you're starting, but I think it's much better if you can associate the word with a mental picture in your head, like associate the word with the actual thing instead of associating the word with another word, right? I'm not sure if that's what you're saying, but if I'm saying like, oh, this cup here, instead of thinking of the word in Portuguese, when I hear the word cup, I need to like imagine
have the
image in my mind, associate with the actual thing, right? The actual object.
When you're talking about this learning, that's what I follow and I always recommend to my students. It's the PNL. It's in Portuguese saying this, but it's the linguistic programmation.
Okay.
This neuro-linguistic programmation is about the skills you have for learning a language. You just mentioned about the picture, so you're mentioning visual. And you also mentioned the audio, so it's the sound, cup, but you also have the motion, which is for a cup, not much of a motion, but the synesthetic and motion are important because when you're talking about this, you're talking about the experience of that. So if you mention the cup, you automatically can connect it to something you really like to drink. So it reminds you of a feeling, of maybe experiences. So this is the whole environment around that. And talking of translating things, translation works, as well as other techniques also work. But what you have to keep in mind is how fast you are learning and how effective you are learning. So if you think that you are stuck, try to change. There are several ways of learning a language. And if you are really focusing and improving your English, try to balance your skills. I always say this to people. Don't just read or just type or just listen or just speak. I believe that speaking is the best one, is the toughest one. But I already know people who lived abroad for several years and then they needed to at some point type. So they didn't know how to type, or they didn't know how to deal with the, write an email, something like that, which is very important nowadays. So I always recommend you learn all skills, even though you maybe need more to type or to speak in English, whatever it is, try to balance all of them. That's more interesting because you follow the pattern of a specific word. You always connect, like the way you spell one word to another word, maybe the sound of one word, you can predict how you spell it.
Yeah.
So it's always the best option to balance your skills.
Yeah. Any apps that you would recommend people to use?
Yes. There are several apps, and apps are ever changing. So I already recommended apps in the past that they were very useful, but after some updates, they were not that effective. Also, apps that were just outdated, and apps coming over and over again. So I know apps for improving all your skills.
Okay.
Your speaking skills, your written skills, your listening
probably
skills.
Wouldn't recommend one single app that would do everything.
Not at all.
Just different apps for different abilities.
Because some apps are better than the other apps in one specific thing.
Okay.
So I know apps that are basically almost the whole English course. They sell you that, this is the English course, we're going to change your life. And of course, there are always people who will not learn from that methodology.
Okay.
I can guarantee you that. There's no fail-proof methodology. There will be always people who adapt better to one methodology and other people who don't.
Okay.
They won't learn from that. So it's about not giving up, trying different ways, because some people are very focused about the fun part of English. And of course, we all want to have fun learning English. I learned the fun way, but I know several people will not learn only from getting in touch with their favorite games and, music series, because you need to organize, you need to learn from it, and you need to have someone to assist you. If you have some skills, maybe you can get easier how to pronounce, but the tongue could be an enemy for some people, how they speak, how they pronounce, and sometimes they lack feedback about that. But for example, nowadays we have several apps that recognize your voice, closed captions. If you're talking right now, I'm talking to you. Many apps, they have automatically generated captions. If you're reading the captions that are being generated by your voice, you have some feedback. Although this is not enough. It helps, but it's not enough for you to improve. That's when teachers or someone who speaks better than you can give you some help about that. And I can personally indicate teacher, because you really need to learn how to pronounce the words, and how you make that improvement requires practice. And sometimes you just know how to focus on that practice, you just do it in the right way. But there are many techniques. If you're trying hard and if you're stuck, look for the help of a professional.
Look for this guy. But I'll ask him in a few minutes just to share his content. So you share his handle on, I don't know, Instagram, whatever social media you are. So you guys can, I don't know, learn from him. But I was gonna say one thing that I can recommend people is watching this podcast, because you're gonna be learning, not learning, but like improving your listening skills, practicing your listening skills. And I mean, it's a way, if you find that this is fun, that this is relevant to you. In my personal experience, I really love podcasts. I watch a lot of content online on YouTube, and if I'm learning a language and I say this, but I'm preaching, but I'm not practicing. Because what I tell people usually is like, oh, look for content that you like, you know, something, let's say you're interested in, I don't know, geopolitics. And then if you can find a very good video in your target language talking about that subject, that topic that you enjoy, then, I mean, go for it, you know, use the captions and actively try to, you know, learn new words, pause the videos and look up the meanings and try maybe form sentences with it. So
it's a good tip. It's a good tip. And I would recommend also doing that when you're doing an activity that takes a lot of your time and your ears are available. Okay. So, for example, if you are working out, and some people love listening to music, of course, but if you are able to work out and listen to this podcast at the same time, of course, you're doing two things at the same time. If you're doing the dishes, maybe. If you're driving, a lot of people take advantage of their bad time for improving their listening skills.
It is an amazing tip. Yes, I should follow that tip because I'm not following. I've been trying to learn German forever, and my German is not improving. And now I started learning Russian, which is even more challenging because it's a whole new alphabet. But yeah, maybe I'll put those tips into practice.
There are several tips that apply to all languages. And
yeah,
this is a good one. Listening to podcasts while you're doing another activity that will just, you know, be in silence. You could be listening.
Exactly. So, and how can people find you online so they can get in contact and see your own tips, other tips that you might have to offer?
So teacher Celso, my name, Celso, teacher Celso. Just you can find me on Instagram, also working on starting my TikTok, but just got the name for it, but working on this, and in the future also YouTube. Let's see if I will have enough time for all of it. But the idea of this is, again, just share what I do best over 10 years, teaching people how to improve their English. So this is what the goal is, just pass it on, because I know a lot of people who struggled a lot, and I could really help them improve in their English. And I'm really happy.
Nice, yeah, that's amazing. And once again, thank you very much for joining me in this podcast. I wish the other guys were here too. They unfortunately couldn't make it today, but maybe we can invite you again.
Of course.
But yeah, in the near future, so the other guys can meet you and yeah, we can have a nice conversation.
I'll be glad to have them around here, and there are several things to talk about when it comes to learning English and other languages, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you. And if you guys liked this video, please subscribe, leave comments, click the bell for notifications when the new videos are uploaded. And yeah, that's it. Until next time, peace.